You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And today we take the Backlash full frontal assault, at least online. My guest for the conversation is Cécile Simmons, an investigative researcher at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, focusing on disinformation, misogyny, and digital culture. She was previously an advisor to the charity Glitch, which focuses on ending gender-based online violence, and also advises tech companies, government bodies, and civil society organizations on online harms. She's written for publications including The Guardian, Politico, and Wired, and has appeared as a commentator on broadcast media, including BBC News and ABC News and France 24. And she's here to discuss her new book, which is called Control, Hate, Delete. So I'll be back with Cécile in just a moment after these brief words. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Cécile Simmons, welcome to Women's Media Center Live. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. The book is called Control, Hate, Delete. And control is spelled the way it is on your computer, CTRL, because a lot of it is about online, I was going to say, meanness, nastiness, torture of women, bad things that happen to women. And it didn't start with Gamergate, but it certainly peaked there and then went on and got even peakier. So the book is out here now, and it is interesting because it's one of the very first few books to address what to do about the new, I don't know what to call it, but the new hate fest against women, the new anti-feminist backlash, and how we fight it. That's the subtitle. So tell me about the book. I've read it, and I have questions and I have thoughts and so forth. But you lay down the basic turf. The part one is about the problem, and part two is about ways of solving it. But go ahead.
Yes, so I a little bit maybe about me. So I am a UK-based researcher. I was born in France. I think that kind of also transpires in the book a little bit. But I have worked for many years in counter-extremism. So focusing on kind of far-right extremism, hate speech. And a few years ago, I started looking at extreme misogyny before people were really paying attention. And I started seeing how communities of men, which used to be kind of composed of a few blogs and forums, were really kind of coming into the mainstream. I was also seeing a new kind of normalization of abuse of women online, be they, activists, journalists, politicians, but also pretty much anyone who just tries to say anything online, especially any woman trying to say something about women's experiences.
Oh, yeah.
I worked on a lot of these issues for a few years, but what really struck me is how much of those attempts to silence women, to really kind of undo policies, spread during the pandemic when a lot of other things happened, including, conspiratorial kind of anti-vax
Sure.
stuff also spreading. And from a very personal perspective, I found out that a man I knew who was quite close to me was actually had become a men's rights activist. He had joined one of the kind of oldest men's movements that we consider to be part of the manosphere, these anti-feminist communities, which have really grown and I suppose structure themselves online. But I didn't know that. I've known him for many years, and I didn't know that he had started embracing these ideas. And part of me thought, well, it's not really that surprising, given what I'm seeing online. Is it that surprising that this really kind of came into my life? I thought I was only looking at that content behind the screen. And actually, no, I wasn't. And I've come to the conclusion that a lot of women now have someone like that in their lives, because increasingly, anti-feminist content that has spread online and that's been, amplified by algorithms and by social media platforms shapes men's understanding of women and shapes actually political campaigns. It shapes individual behaviors, and it shapes the way we think about key issues, policies, and so on. And so I wanted to write a book that explains how the internet is shaping that conversation. And, we can say, well, who really cares about the internet? In some ways, it's not real life. But I think that, online and offline has really become blurred for a lot of people. There was that very interesting finding from a report on American men by Equimundo, which found that 40% of men find their online lives more satisfying than their real lives. And so, we can say, well, it's just the internet, but actually for a lot of us, it's just become part of life. And I wanted to explain what was happening on these online platforms. How come, when you switch on your Instagram or whatever, how come if you're a woman, you're finding all this trad content? How come if you're a man, you're always being targeted by these influencers? What's been happening? And I wanted to give an accessible overview of that. And I also wanted to talk to, a range of people who are trying to, I suppose, make sense of the popularity of this content and trying to, shape solutions to it.
Interesting. Tell me how, because this is the first question that bubbles into my mind. How could you, Will was his name, right?
Yes.
How could you not know about him?
Well, yes.
I don't mean to be blaming you. I mean, it is a genuine. I think it's important to try to understand because many women obviously would be falling prey to that. But how could what was operating in you that cut him the slack to be?
Well, I think that he started talking about his ideas in a way that I think he wasn't before. So what happened is that after the pandemic, he started saying, well, actually, men are oppressed, or, the statistics about, assault, they're not true. He started sort of saying that in conversation, and he wasn't doing it before. And I think that the fact that perhaps he was willing to be more open about it is, I think, because there's been an opening of discourse. At the same time as this was happening, we were seeing, widely followed influencers who I'm not going to name, but, who are getting millions of views online and really becoming popular. And I think that as there's been also more media coverage of these movements, it's almost become easier for men to actually be quite open about it. Whereas before, I think there was an understanding that maybe this isn't something that we say in, say, kind of progressive circles. And interestingly, of course, there are overlaps between kind of conservative politics and this type of anti-feminist politics. But sometimes we can also think that only a certain type of man will really be attracted to these ideas. Very young men, very conservative men, and actually we're seeing older men as well. We're seeing men sometimes who might even vote for Democrats or for the Labour Party in the UK. And so I think that we just need to remember that complexity as well, because I think that a lot of these movements are trying to attract a broad coalition of men across different sort of backgrounds, ages, communities, and they use men's resentment of women as a recruitment strategy. And so understanding that that is also part of the strategy means that, well, we don't get caught up in a certain idea of who these men are, I suppose.
The reason that it interests me in particular is that we've spent a lot of time and energy in the women's movement in the States, and to a large extent internationally as well, in getting women in supporting women in not urging, but in other words, well, supporting their challenging men the minute that there are sexist things said because it's not all right, so it's not okay to make a funny joke and say women have no sense of humor. It's not okay to etc. And so I'm curious whether now it's a question as to whether that empowers them or whether that does the opposite. But usually you could also say it drives them underground. And so then they don't have to face the music or a feminist sensibility, particularly a friendly one. So that's where my confusion lies. Well, tell me about some of the strategies that you have in the second part of the book, because we're trying very hard to stay afloat in this country because of he who shall not be named, who is squatting in our White House. But it's very difficult because every day it really is a flood the zone, and the assault is all over the place. And there is some tiny fragments of good news, but not a whole lot. It's very depressing, and it's depressing because, as scientists let us know, there's approximately 5 years until we reach a point of no healing of environment, and the planet begins to be, so we're all struggling valiantly, and the women's movement more than anything else. The good thing that I will say is that the women's movement is still vast and furious, bloody furious, and has a very new and young and strong leadership, and it's mostly women of color. So that's all very, very good. But the rest isn't so great. So share some of the fight back.
Absolutely. So I think so. Because I work for a think tank. I work in kind of digital policy. I have spent a lot of time trying to hold the social media accountable for the content that's on there, and it's become quite clear with the way a platform like Twitter, X, has evolved, the way Facebook
X
has evolved, and there is no real attempt to pretend that these platforms are really trying to do anything to be a civil space.
No.
I do think that some countries have shown that you can actually create regulation. You can, hold platforms to account, but it very much depends on how kind of strong I suppose the desire for regulation is. But that is a really, I suppose, complex part of the conversation.
We look
I do think
longingly, we look yearningly at regulations, but
I do think as well that there is a shift in conversation in the way we talk about regulation as well. So there are things, and I talk about that in the book, if I may use the word on the podcast, but I think that something like pornography, I think that the understanding of actually, I suppose, the potential harms of the way the current mainstream pornography, that the harms that it creates, is a conversation that wasn't happening so much a few years ago. And I think that that's become just a bit more key to the conversations we're having around regulations. I mean, there are efforts, for example, in Europe in regulating that and recognizing that it's not about whether it exists or not. It's about the corporations that create and amplify this kind of violent content through algorithms. And so I think there is a drive there. I think my biggest hope is really in very local education work. It is in trying to engage men to do some of the work around educating men on sexism, misogyny. I do think, however, that when we talk about men working with men and doing some of the work that really they should be doing, that women shouldn't be doing, I think there is a real difference between addressing misogyny, everyday misogyny, and addressing the real, I suppose, threat of quite extreme online communities. And the very interesting thing is that as societies have become more aware of the risk of misogynistic violence, we've seen a lot of attacks that are clearly linked to misogyny, both in the US, Canada, elsewhere. There's almost a bit of a risk that suddenly you will have a lot of self-proclaimed experts on the manosphere. And I think that in many ways it's important to listen to all the women who have been working on these communities, monitoring them, when we think about how we deal with those communities and the threat that they might pose, but I think that my biggest hope is really in kind of educational interventions. At the moment where I am, I don't think we've got enough going on. But I think that we have a government that has shown desire to create an educational program for kids in school that looks at online misogyny, what they're seeing, and really trying to craft educational responses that are based in evidence and that are of good quality. But I think that right now we're in a space where I don't think a lot of women feel very perhaps optimistic about engaging with men. I think there is a level of disappointment.
There's a level of rage. There's a level of rage.
Absolutely. I think it's actually, you're right. It's more than disappointment and feeling that it's actually not enough, that you can't just, pat a man on the back every time he,
picks up a dish towel,
yes,
fall over sideways.
absolutely.
Gratitude. There's by the way, I mentioned this on a recent podcast, and I should mention it again. Do you know about Culture Redefined? It's an organization.
No.
It's an organization. It's about 10, 12 years old now. Maybe it's even older. Run by a woman, and she's wonderful. Gail Dines, Dines.
Okay.
And it's about it's very discreetly named, but it's about weaning boys off of pornography, because usually online porn is their first sexual experience of anything, and they're sucked from that moment right on into violence and torture, and they think that's the norm. So it's a fascinating, and she does workshops, and it's a whole organization. It's been very quietly going along, doing very much what you're talking about, educating at the grassroots level, women all over the world, and families, and kids, and she tells these marvelous stories about men sitting in the first row and suddenly bursting into tears when they realize that they have taken pleasure from a woman being tortured, and that they didn't mean that. They didn't mean that. But that's an aside. I recommend it, Culture Redefined, for people who are looking. And she has a book as well. Yeah, it's of course. I mean, it's through composed. It is part of government now in this country. This is where I'm coming from. It's saturating our government. It's saturating our culture, and the attention to detail that this regime is layering it, slathering it with, makes it all the more powerful. You'd think that Trump wouldn't bother with the Kennedy Center or the Smithsonian Institution or thing when there's wars going on, major things. But no. No, they will address the tiniest tittle and jot, to make certain that they have wiped this out. And the women's movement in this country is very large and very powerful and very furious. Oh God. And we've been at it a long time. But it sometimes does seem as if we're running to catch our shadow.
Yes, and I think that there are two stories here, really. I think there is a story of, a big backlash. There is. And I think that there are, I suppose, kind of powerful interests, both, political interests, weaponizing those communities. And there are also there's a lot of money being involved in funding online influence campaigns. I think that's one of the
God,
areas that
yes.
interested me in the book as well, is looking at, once you've got communities of men, which are, really kind of locked in conspiracy theories, these can be utilized by pretty much anyone. They can be utilized by powerful states, governments. They can be, used by private interests. And there are a lot of unseen online influence tactics as well going on. So I think you've got this story, but you also have a different story, which is the one you just told, which is that I think that young women today are literate in a way that, for example, I wasn't. I mean, I'm in my 30s, but when I listen to much younger women, I'm just surprised at how much they have read, how much how much they think about feminism, how much they think about different people's condition. And I'm really impressed in some ways. And I see a lot of young, very passionate women. I also see actually young men as well being, I think, a lot more alert to these to feminist ideas in some ways, despite the fact that so many of them are pulled into these online communities. So I see two different things happening. And sadly, I think, as we have seen with some elections, I think that the manosphere can be a powerful political force. It can help you win elections.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's irreversible. I think we're not in the best place today. It's true. But I sort of take courage in that energy I'm seeing.
Oh, well, that's heartening. I'll cling to that like a drowning person to the last bit of raft. But it's very difficult now in the States, as I'm sure you can tell.
Yes.
And that has its own not only that, but I mean, has its own ripple effects on the rest of the world, as well as the effects coming back at us. So it's a real coil. And I don't know what I'm looking for. I'm not seeking a cure-all or magic bullet or something. But what we're doing basically, when I'm asked, well, what is Ms. doing, because I'm the former editor-in-chief, and what are you doing on your podcast? And my answer is everything. You name it, we're doing it. But it isn't so far enough. And I don't know whether the next elections, which are half asked, on purpose, will make any difference. And Trump is moving with such rapidity that it really, really stuns you. I mean, this is not just the Reichstag. This is the Reichstag on steroids. I mean, so that's part of and I do think irrepressibly, and maybe it's just I've been at this too long to not think it, but I do think that we will come out of it. I think that we will survive, and that and I don't think that because we have before many times, et cetera, et cetera. I think that because I think that when women really fully understand the enormity of this struggle, and that it's about democracy, that it's about the planet, that it's about all of these other things at the same time that it's about women. I think that it is irrepressible, but that's just me.
Yeah.
And I could be very wrong. So well, the book is called Control, Hate, Delete. And the subtitle is The New Anti-Feminist Backlash and How We Fight It. I must say, Cécile, that when I was double checking it with Amazon and some of the online places, I was looking at the books that are on sale in the same general category, and it appalled me. It had me climbing walls and going through the ceiling, because there's so many of them, and quite a few are by women, and saying, what was wrong with feminism, and why did where feminism went wrong, and the
Oh gosh.
mistakes that women made, and why women turned to women against women, and it goes on and on and on. And I was so horrified. I wanted to, I don't know, blank out those screens, but yours is smack dead center and not of that ilk, very, very clearly. Control, hate, delete. So congratulations, and
Thank you very much.
and I hope that Will gets with the program. I hope that he
Yes. Well, I think that I always kind of thought to myself, when I kind of realized that this was happening to me, I thought, if he said he would read the book, and I thought to myself, if he's the only one to read the book, that will still be worth it, I think. Because I think hopefully that will get him thinking. And so I think that for me, it was an attempt to perhaps move away from perhaps the kind of drier policy day-to-day work that I was doing, and trying to really kind of engage with this problem on a more personal level. So I'm glad that he's not the only one to have read it, and I hope it will have sparked thoughts. But that was also the thinking.
Well, and I do have to tell you, I mean, you're very admirable, because I would not have had the patience. I would have killed him long before this. I mean, I would have torn him up and shredded him in tiny little pieces when he said the first time that he would have suggested that, women should always ask a man before getting possibly considering an abortion, or that
Yes,
women should,
yes. I
or
mean, it is a
whatever.
form of,
I mean,
yeah.
it's sort of like, you almost lost me on page 3 because of that, or whatever, because I was like, what? But you were very patient, and you were a good friend. And as long as we're still in the particular situation of considering whether and how much men can be friends,
Yes.
then that's a real situation.
Mm.
But you were a very, very patient woman.
I do not, it's not prescriptive. The choices I made are not choices I recommend to every woman out there, actually. I think that these ideas are, impacting our freedom, they're impacting our safety, and this is not, it's a kind of personal endeavor, but it's not something I necessarily recommend. This kind of outreach is not for everyone.
I know.
And I happen to be a researcher, so I really
Right.
wanted to use my skills to produce something.
Exactly. And the
Not for
research,
everyone.
but the research is formidable, and also extremely important and useful. So, control, hate, delete. Control, hate, delete. Comma after the hate, I think. Anyway,
Mhm.
thank you. And thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have to take a short break here, but I'll return in just a moment with, this time, some ironic words. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Falling on platitudes with an air of great discovery. Those are ironic words. Few things bring a slightly bitter smile on my face these days. But certainly one is the apparently earth-shaking discovery of what we already knew, like the rhapsodic adoration that Stephen Miller has for Trump, acutely reminiscent of Goebbels' relationship with the Führer that won him the Ministry of Propaganda. No, I mean further back than that, much further. Ancient Greece, in fact. The previously accepted wisdom is that, of course, all systems then were patriarchal, and had been for, well, forever. And that women never took part in hunting or warfare or anything like that. There is evidence that even in this patriarchal society, men and women were in some respects viewed equally. Myceneans practiced a system of rationing food to citizens, and evidence shows that women received the same amount of rations as men. Well, that was big of them. If women were not officials in the cult or married to high-ranking male officers, they were likely low-ranking laborers. All of the women in a work group, for example, would serve the same occupation, such as textiles. Women in work groups are not believed to have been able to acquire land holdings or have had economic independence of any kind, and are believed by some to have been slaves, although there's some conflicting debates among them, scholars concerning this. Mycenean society is believed to have been largely patriarchal, but women could exert social and economic power through titles and positions of power, like that of a priestess, though religion was not the only place that a woman could gain social authority. Women with special talents or skills, such as being a skilled midwife or craftswoman, could gain social authority in their villages, but they're not believed to have been able to receive land holdings. Elite women, those who were married to elite males were afforded benefits fitting their station. But even the wives of elites could not own land and had no economic independence. And some scholars do believe that Knossos, which was the capital of Crete, was probably more equal in relation to gender than Pylos, the capital of Mycenae, though the evidence for this is little and is highly disputed. Disputed, I'll say. Disputed about a civilization that itself was spun off Crete, which was matriarchal. Indeed, some scholars believe that the history of Mycenes' name changes from matriarchy to patriarchy, and it's charted in art and in plays, from Aeschylus through Sophocles and Euripides, the eruptive changes brought about in the family of Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, and general in the long war against Troy, and pretty much a not likable fellow. His family, the family of Agamemnon, was decidedly dysfunctional. So, first, they were 4 of them, at least. There was Agamemnon, and there was Clytemnestra, his queen, and some say the regnant monarch, of whom he was a consort, and their children, Orestes and Iphigenia, or Iphigenia, and Electra. Agamemnon was a not terribly pleasant person. He was very ambitious and loved winning, was obsessed with winning, loved war, was glad of a chance to go and smash the Trojans. And he was also furious, seething about Clytemnestra, who persisted in acting the way she had been raised to act, which was as the regnant queen of Mycenae, and not an addendum. And so he was very angry at that. And when the time came for the journey to Troy, Iphigenia went with him, and he sacrificed her by throwing her overboard to win the favor of the gods and have a safe crossing. When news of this reached Clytemnestra, she was in great pain and grief, and vowed revenge. She also took a new lover. She took Aegisthus as her new lover and her new sort of attendant king, with full authority vested in her herself. Agamemnon, on his return from sacking Troy, was killed by Clytemnestra. Did away with him. Then Electra, the daughter of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon, then dedicated herself to avenging her father. And a lot revolves around Electra at this point, because she is the hinge figure. She switches. She is the one who, in a sense, changes from the matriarchal woman to the patriarchal. She throws in with daddy. Electra decides to dedicate herself to avenging her father. But she needs her brother, Orestes, to do that, which he did when he returned from his travels after much hand-wringing and angst. He did kill his mother and avenge his father on the strict orders of Apollo, the god. But killing one's mother was an unspeakable sin, so much so that the Erinyes were summoned by the gods to hunt and torture Orestes forever. These were the Furies, and they came like swarms of flies. Cassandra, a passerby trying to return to Troy but never making it back, kidnapped by Agamemnon and enslaved by him, had foreseen all of this trouble, but no one listened to her prophecies. I mean, really, where do they think such characters as Clytemnestra and Electra are from? Walmarts? They were entombed in the historical myths and arts of time. But a recent analysis by Nicoletta Antonielli Michel of the Technical University of Darmstadt in Germany cited that a specific group of people depicted in a Mycenean artwork known as the Sword Bearers were actually women. Fancy that. Previously, it was thought that the artifact depicted men due to certain symbols, but recent evidence suggests quite the contrary. Michel's study focuses on the Sword Bearers, an ancient artwork from the Myceneans done on a crater. A crater is a sizable two-handled vase typical of ancient Greece, and usually depicts artwork that plays a significant role in deciphering their culture in modern times. The figures in the artifact have long hair, bear swords, and wear large cloaks with a dotted design. Large cloaks and long hair are typical symbols of women in Mycenean iconography. However, the figures were always believed to be men because they also possessed swords, historically male symbols. Michel's analysis suggests the figures are women because the work may depict ceremonial and ritual rites rather than warfare. The symbolism of the weapon in these figures could be more connected to ritual power and female authority in religious ceremonies than a representation of violence or war, said Michel in her groundbreaking study. She cited women's critical ceremonial roles in ancient Aegean culture to back her claim. The significance of women in ceremonial practices makes it reasonable to believe that the work should be re-examined through the lens of ceremonial practice instead of the previous solely military lens through which it was formally studied. And her analysis also delves deeper into the lack of violence in the sword bearers. The figures are all depicted in peaceful scenes, further suggesting a separation from warfare. The chariots and the processions depicted on the crater further lend to a ceremonial depiction. And her research builds on prior studies by Louise Steele from the University of Wales. In her analysis, Steele also cited the long hair and cloak and the way the sword is positioned across the figure's chests. If Michel and Steele are correct, this could change how researchers look at all Mycenean iconography in the future. The same clitoridectomies, the same excisions, might as well call them in essence what they really were performed on the great Viking women warriors and the great Viking women queens. And on the Mochai, an ancient people who held a vast civilization near to what is now Peru, and was established and thriving well before the Aztec and the Maya, and so forth and so on. Scratch the patriarchal surface slightly, and guess what comes through the pentimento underneath. Just imagine for a moment that all our history has been glazed over by those patriarchal lies. What work we have to do. Bringing it to the surface, that's our job. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.